I'm Chris Stutchko, co-host of the Ninth Grade Experience podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Thanks for listening to the Tech Tools for Teachers podcast, where each week we talk about a free piece or two of technology that you can use in your classroom. I'm your host, Shanna Martin. I'm a middle school teacher, technology, and instructional coach from my district.
And I'm her producer and husband, Sir Fuzz Martin of the Pod Table.
Wow.
Yeah, because it's Night Lab.
I know. Clever.
I'm a
so
dork.
clever.
But that's okay. It's okay. I'm going to embrace it.
I thoroughly appreciate that. Oh my goodness. So here we are, episode 143.
143.
And we are coming back to a site that I started talking about. I guess I did talk about it in episode 135. And we mentioned StoryMap.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole thing is created through Night Lab, which is Northwestern. And I said I'd bring it back later on so I can talk about more of these cool projects that they've built in, because they're really neat to build into your classroom. So I had talked about StoryMap in episode 135.
Mm-hmm.
And this past week, my students have been using it a ton in the classroom. So then I was like, you know what? Let's bring this back since I'm using it so much this week and it's very relevant. And I'm going to talk about some of the other cool things that they have available. So
at the Night Lab.
At the Night Lab. KNIGHT.northwestern.edu/projects is where we're headed. And they have several different projects on here. They have all kind of going at once. And as a teacher, you can easily build these things into your classroom with any kind of project that you want to work on. And what's neat is that they develop these prototype projects to promote like quality journalism and storytelling and building content. Like that's the whole purpose of these projects. And StoryMap is one where you get to have the map and crawl around and have kind of like slides where you have information and images and it follows the map around. They look really, really cool looking.
Yeah.
And it's easy. My kids, I could explain to them, and they cranked out some really neat things this week when they were talking about immigration and they had to track an immigrant. So we used StoryMap.
Sounds like the perfect tool for immigration.
It was fantastic. So the other two that I'm highlighting this week, it's Storyline is the first one, which is kind of like a timeline where you build data into it. So
okay.
So if you're going to use Storyline, we'll start with Storyline. So it's storyline.nightlab.com, and tell a story behind the numbers is their like theme for this. So this is great for like politics or tracking disease or tracking like when you've got data to track,
right?
Or years of information to track. Like if you're tracking years, kind of like a timeline, but then how, like the rise and fall of data within that timeline. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think their example that they show is with U.S. economics over time.
Right.
And so it talks about Reagan's boom, and then it talks about the downturn, and then the internet comes, and it has numbers for income at each of those levels, at each of those dates.
So it's like dates and times. You can do it either timing of something, or you can do dates or dates and times together. And then the data. So if you could do like weather, like if you want to build this into science class, date and time, and then tracking like the percentage of humidity, or if you want to track just like degrees, or like how hot it is outside, or how much rain or snowfall, or
essentially you're creating a pretty cool line graph with details on each data point.
Yeah, so it gives you the line graph, and then you have like the data, like the story information behind it connected to it, if that makes sense. So it's a really cool way for kids to present data without just, and you can see it, like you can see it along a time frame, which is kind of neat. What I also appreciate, and they are great about the directions, like make a storyline. Step 1, put all your data in a Google Sheet. It tells you exactly how to set up your Google Sheet.
Oh, nice.
Now, I would recommend this for like upper middle school or high school, unless you really have kids that are strong on Google Sheets. just because entering information in Google Sheet, if you mess it up, it messes up your timeline. You can always go back and change it, but it's just they have to be familiar with how to use Google Sheets. But also, this is fantastic in like computers class for when you're teaching Google Sheets. You can teach kids how to use Google Sheets appropriately, and then they can apply like any topic they want to put in there.
Yeah.
So this really can be used across the board for content, computers, science, social studies, math, language arts, people, world information.
Yeah.
Like this really can go anywhere. You just have to kind of know how to use Sheets or learn how to use Sheets using this. So you put your data in Google Sheet and it tells you step 1. It shows you exactly what you need to do. Step 2, add your story. So then you like put your information in, like they have a year, they have the data, they have titles and then text, and you load all this into your Google Sheets. And they have an exact template, like how they want your Google Sheet to look. And when that whole thing is done, it shows you like, then you configure and publish. You publish to the web. It shows you like they're very good about the steps that you load this in. And then you drop your Google spreadsheet into their URL. You hit load and it configures your storyline.
Cool.
And it makes this cool data-based timeline that looks like across time graph, but is very visual, and it's very cool.
You should see Shanna's arms the way she's making.
I know. I'm like, hi, you can hear me, and you cannot see my hands flailing around right now while I'm talking about the storyline.
Whoa, that's a really wavy line.
Picture my hands going all over the place as I'm explaining the line I'm talking about.
Yes.
So what's cool is, too, they're very good about like frequently asked questions, like how many data points can I use, and what if I want a bunch of lines of data and languages and all kinds of things. So they're very supportive in the directions, and the directions are very clear. So if you are familiar, even briefly, with Google Sheets, this walks you through how to set up this really cool storyline that mixes graphing with like a timeline, and it's very neat to see.
They do have some really good instructions on the things to know section as well. So you can only have time and date formats on the x-axis, which is cool, which is where it goes into the storyline kind of portion.
Yep.
It is designed to be mobile first, so they want everything to be short. So they say no more than 12 cards per story. Titles are limited to 54 characters, and paragraphs are limited to 200 characters. So that means your students will have to keep it concise, which is good.
Right. Yeah, for grading and for your own sanity.
Exactly. And then storyline works best with fewer than 800 data points, but guessing that many students are going to be putting even more than 100 data points in.
No. Unless you got that one kid who really wants to put some effort in, and more power to him. So storyline is just a very cool way to share out information that you don't always see. Like it's not just, it's a cool way to use sheets and graphing and visuals with that timeline and have that text in there too. So
cool.
Storyline, Night Lab project, very cool.
I have the song "Story of My Life" stuck in my head because you sing it.
Story of my life. I sing it all
sing
day,
it all the time,
every day, because everything is the story of my life. All right. So besides storyline, and if you guys look at this, you'll appreciate it's storyline, which was today's topic, story map, which I talked about before, and now it's timeline. And all three of them are different visuals, but they are sharing out information. So we'll skip over to the timeline one, which is also very cool. And this is next in my world for my students. Just you wait, 8th graders. And so the timeline also uses the cool, like loading things into a Google Sheet. But what this one does is it will give you like the timeline effect across the bottom of the screen. And then it looks like Google Slides within the top. So you get the best of both worlds. So you get the timeline on the bottom, the text in the top, and then so as you travel through your timeline, your slides come across the top of the screen. And again, this one loads in tips and tricks, keep it short, pick stories that have strong chronological narratives, write each event as a part of a narrative. And they have examples in there. There's quite a few of them. The Night Lab ones across the bottom are the easiest, I think, to understand because not all the links I checked before work. But then, again, on the bottom, make a timeline, build your Google spreadsheet using this template. They'll give you the template, use this template. And then you drop in your dates, your text, your links to the media. So if you have your pictures and your columns and all that kind of stuff. Making a timeline from a Google spreadsheet. Again, step 2, how to publish it. Step 3, copy and paste into this URL. It creates a free, makes it beautiful. Step 4, how to share the link. It can be embedded if you want it to. If you want to open a new window, all those kinds of things. So again, it walks you through the step-by-step process. And this one also has a little video that goes with it that shows you how to make these little timelines.
Mm-hmm.
And again, beautiful visuals. The information just gets loaded into a Google Sheet. It's great for sheet practice. It's great for making these cool timelines. And they're just kind of nice. I appreciate, I guess, that they're streamlined. Like sometimes kids get carried away with all this stuff.
Yeah.
And here it makes a very nice professional looking timeline on the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And you have your visual and your little description. And what a cool way to present information. Share it out, whatever you want to share your timeline of, whether it's something in history or if it's relevant for your school district, even just different ways of sharing out this information, these timelines. But they look very cool. And as long as you follow the directions, it will walk you right through and put them right into these cool formats for you.
Yeah. And they've been used by Time, CNN, Engadget, Mashable, a whole bunch of places. It's very slick. And the fact that, like you were saying, that you're limited in what you put in helps to... You find this a lot when you're working. I work in a creative field. Like when you have guidelines of where you have to stick to, and people like try to push the boundaries, but they all like work within that, and it all feels right and clean.
And it teaches concise writing, which I think is huge. You can go on and on and on all day long about somebody's life, but if you can tell it to me in 3 sentences, and I'm like, wow, that's impactful. It has a lot of information in a very short amount of time. Like that's a skill set to practice too.
Yeah, and then you can grow classrooms full of great tweet writers someday.
Right? Fabulous.
Though, sidebar, Twitter did the opposite of that, and this week they just allowed 4,000 characters to those who...
Nobody needs that on Twitter.
To those who have Twitter Blue. Anyway, carry on.
But anyway, so the Night Lab has these great projects, and they're definitely, both of these upper middle school, high school for sure, and, into college and presentations, like these are very cool ways to share out information that looks professional, that, is teaching both spreadsheet use along with any content can apply these things, whether you're in a like tech ed class where we're lining out, steps to a process, to important people, to the weather. There's just so many ways you can use both storyline and timeline, and they're visually appealing and have a lot of just... It's another cool way for kids to share out their information. So I recommend both of them. And if you want to use StoryMap, you can come back to StoryMap and listen to that episode too.
135.
So yeah, that's kind of fun and schnaz.
Yeah. Again, storyline.nightlab.com and timeline.nightlab.com. And we'll link to those in the show notes and on the website at smartnwi.com.
And if you create some cool ones, please share them. I love to see examples of what other teachers and other students have created, just because like I may think one thing and then you can take it and roll with it. So please share out those examples. I always like to see what other people are doing.
Yeah, me
too.
That's
fun. Well, thanks for tuning in. This has been the Tech Tools for Teachers podcast. If you ever have any questions, you can find me on Twitter at SmartNWI. And if you want to get more information on the links to the technology discussed in this episode, you can visit smartnwi.com. Also, if you'd like to support the show, please consider buying me a coffee or two. Visit buymeacoffee.com/smartnwi or visit smartnwi.com and click on that cute little purple coffee cup. Your donations help keep the show going. New episodes each week. Thanks for listening. Go educate and innovate.
The ideas and opinions expressed on this podcast and the Smart NWI website are those of the author, Shanna Martin, and not of her employer. Prior to using any of the technologies discussed on this podcast, please consult with your employer regulations. This podcast offers no guarantee that these tools will work for you as described, but we sure hope they do. And we'll talk to you next time right here on the Tech Tools for Teachers podcast.